Perfect. So, hi everyone. My name is Tyler Lum. I'm the APIKC Communications Coordinator. I'm just here to continue our APIKC Careers and Student Affairs month. So today we have.
Sefa Aina.
So nice to meet you, Sefa. Would love to hear a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Tyler, for having me. My name is Sefa Aina. I'm currently the Associate Dean and Director of the Draper Center for Community Partnerships at Pomona College. The Draper Center is sort of the community-facing office for Pomona College, which is one of the Claremont colleges, small liberal arts college here in sort of the eastern part of the LA County. Yeah. I've been here. This is my 21st year at the college. Prior to that, and where I got my sort of start was at UCLA in the Asian American Studies Center. And sort of that's kind of where it all began for me. I've told this story multiple times, but when I started at the UCLA Asian American Studies Center, um, and I tell this story, and the older I get, and the more I realize just how fortunate I was. When I walked into the Asian American Studies Center, Yuri Kochiyama was two doors down writing her memoirs. Don Nakanishi was the director upstairs. Bob Nakamura, who just recently passed, created visual communications, created for Center of Ethno Communications at UCLA. He was also there. Russell Leong, the Glenn Amatsu. These people were just they're pathfinders and legends in Asian American studies and the API community. I remember one of the first conferences I was part of. I was on a panel with Kent Wong, who just also recently passed, and I was just this young kid, just right out of school, 24 years old, and here I am surrounded by these people, and as a Samoan, learning from all these other Asian American sort of legends about how to um, be a leader, how to be a community person, how to, especially from a higher ed space, how to um, make this place, and at the time that place was UCLA, how to make this place work for everyone, especially those who weren't fortunate enough to have access to a place like UCLA. And so I would say that my entree into higher ed wasn't really, about higher ed itself. It was really about making this place accessible to community, and focusing on community. This it really was built around this idea of power to the people, and um, you know, um, you know, it was about that. It was built on that, and it was led by people whose lives were examples of that. Yuji Ichioka, the person who was credited with coining the term, the political term of Asian American. He was five doors down. You know what I mean? And I'm soaking it in, as a young 20 something year old. I'm lucky, man. You know what I mean? Like, who can say that they were part of that? You know what I'm saying? Like I'm in my 20s, and all these like OGs are there, and I'm learning from them on um to serve the people. That was the mantra. And so I'm learning my craft, if you will. I'm learning how to be in higher ed, and it was never a pressure to represent, um, PIs within the API rubric. It was more like, who are you going to be for Pacific Islanders? Who are you going to be for Samoan people? You know what I mean? And it was like, this was about me doing it and standing up for my community. And so it was just a magical experience overall. And I'm just so when I reflect on it, I'm just like, man, this is who can say that they've started like that? You know what I'm saying? So, um, student affairs and academia and education, that was all secondary. What was primary for me was I'm working with legends. I'm working with amazing people, man. And then that to me was like, you can't replace that, you know. So yeah, yeah. And somewhere along the line I realized, hey, you know what? I'm a student affairs officer.
Yeah, that's how I feel.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's wow, just like so powerful. I
yeah,
think hearing your journey, you're part of what got you here, and just like the people that came past you, that you would just be
yeah,
to be four and five doors down, four doors
yeah.
down, a door down.
Yeah, man. It's wild. It's wild. And as I get older, I get like, man, that was crazy. That was crazy. I remember sitting in one of our first retreats and sitting at the table with these people and thinking, man, one day I'm going to be worthy of this seat. You know what I mean? And you know, it was just it's been a moment. And when I think about what that place was, especially the UCLA Asian American Studies Center, because the way that center was created, it was created out of the 60s, and it was created as an organized research unit. And so in it were these components. One was a reading room slash library, because at the time it was created, there was no such thing as Asian American studies. So there was no literature. There was not a collection of literature. There was no literature. So you had to create that. You had to create a reading room. You had to create a library, and you had to create archives, which is kind of what Yuri was uh, Yuri was doing there. She was writing her memoirs and she was putting her archives there. Um, there was also no publications, which is another part of what we had there, which is what was led by Russell Leong. And there was no other, these other institutions had to be built. And then there was no connection to the community and students and community projects, which is where I worked. And so, I learned all these things. And when I came from UCLA to Pomona College, my first job here was the director of the Asian American Resource Center. I brought that whole sort of schematic with me. And we talked about capturing stories out here in the Inland Empire. We talked about um, identifying, those communities that were on the margins out here in the Inland Empire. So that whole experience at UCLA and that legacy kind of, that genealogy came with me. You know what I mean? And so, 20 years later, some of the programs that we did and we started when I came here still happen today. We started some outreach programs with the Tongan community. We started this program called the Archivist, which is sort of a riff off of the ethnocom stuff. And we really kind of um, built on what's come out of the work of all these amazing people. And even though these kids here were born in the early to mid 2000s, they have no idea that the stuff that they're working on and working through are on the shoulders of these people who are like Asian American legends. You know what I mean? And I feel proud of being sort of that connector and that sort of that conduit, that was there, and witness to these amazing folks and bridge between them and this. So really, really, yeah. So when I think of my job, it's beyond student affairs. You know what I mean? Because it's like, how do you capture that? You know what I'm saying? How do you put that into a PowerPoint presentation? You know what I mean? You're building you're building generations, you're building communities, you're building legacies. You know what I mean? And because these people will go on to become doctors and lawyers, but more importantly, they'll become representations of our community. They'll become, you know, manifestations of the power of what our ancestors had hoped we'd become. You know what I mean? And some of that they will have learned, through the work that we do. Yeah.
That's amazing. I just hear the conviction you're saying, everything that it means a lot, and I hear the work you're doing. So I appreciate you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just think I just had a question about that of as you kind of mentioned it a little bit, but I just want to reiterate. Was there a pivotal moment in your journey that like confirmed this was the right field for you? I think you kind of mentioned it,
Mm,
but was there a main pivotal moment that you can talk a little bit more about?
I don't know if there was one pivotal moment. There's just a bunch of them, I guess. Um, um, yeah, I'd say there was a bunch. I think I've been doing this for such a long time now. It sometimes it doesn't feel like it's been that long, but I'm almost, professionally, uh, all coming up on 30 years of doing this work. And so I have former students who are like professors now, and I was at a conference and one of my former students was a main presenter and you know I didn't want to I didn't I just kind of went and kind of stood in the back and then she just happened to see me and then she just started breaking down and she just kind of before she started she just talked about how the class that she took with me was like the reason she's doing this work and then it's just like it's moments like that it's like wow I mean she's a freaking rock star now you know what I mean I'm like but she was like you just have no idea what you did you know what I mean and to be fair I was like that when I had her as a student, I'm like, man, I barely knew what I was doing. You know what I mean? I was like, I was still working out the kinks. You know what I mean? I was like, still raw, uh, obviously it made an impact. And so it, I think those are the things that more than anything is when I get to sit with old students that I'm still in touch with and we're still in touch and they're still grateful and reflective of the things that it really feels like this is more than a job. It's about lifelong friendships and I performed a marriage ceremony between two former students, you know what I mean? It's like those kinds of things, I've held the babies of former students, you know what I mean? I've been to birthdays and weddings and like those are the things, but it's not necessarily the things that happen on campus because those are like a given. It's those life moments that you get to be a part of that aren't really, you know, um, prescribed, but are special to people. Um, yeah, so yeah, I guess those would be more of the things,
Yeah, I think you said it really well. I think I hear the students that you made an impact on, and
Yeah,
it's for the people, not for the accolades or the things you're trying to get. It's for the people you're helping and supporting the
yeah,
journey now almost to 30 years. I think that's really
yeah.
just shows your accomplishment of what you've done in the past and what to the future and this everything you've done for our
Hmm.
community and for the students in that. Well. But yeah,
Hmm.
I think another for the younger folks who are trying to just be just like you, what would you wish you have known when you first entered the field and giving the advice back to the people who are just about joining this field?
Mm, hmm. Hmm. Um, what do I wish I wish I would have had a little bit more grace with myself, you know. Um, it took me a long time to accept that I was good enough. You know what I mean? And it was a lot of like, you have to kind of convince yourself and convince yourself, but deep down inside, you can still doubt yourself. You know what I mean? And I wish, I could tell myself and then really kind of believe that, like, you're all right. You're doing all right. You're okay. Because I'm rough, man. I've been in this for a long time, and I'm grateful for the things that I've been able to do and for the success that I've had. And even today, I still like, should I be further along than I am? But then there are parts of this, like I'm like thinking there aren't other parts of higher ed I'd rather be in. Like I don't aspire to work in certain parts. You know what I mean? Like I can do it, but it's not really what, like that kind of job would kill my soul. You know what I mean? And I have respect for everyone who does that, and I, 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 I hope they do well, and but it's not my get down. You know what I mean? Like I can't do judicial board. I can't do like dean of student stuff. For the most part, it's very reactionary and it's very punitive, and that's not my get down. You know what I mean? Like I can't do that. I tell people, man, I work in the church, man. Only believers walk through those doors. You got to believe you can change the world, man. And if you believe that, then shit, let's knock this shit out. You know what I mean? But if you got to come in here because you're forced to come in here and you don't want to see me and you hate the school, I'm like, yeah, and I'm already two strikes. You know what I mean? And like all it takes is for one bad word or one false feeling or one bad look, and it's like, all the rails come off, and so I sometimes feel like it's enough. You're enough. And the things you're doing are enough, and even the approach, because it's very unorthodox. You know what I mean? I've never been active in NASPA. I've never, you know what I mean? I've been in student affairs this whole time, but I've never, done traditional things, and not that I've not wanted to. It's just, I've a like my entree into the field was different. I came in working with these activist people, so my mindset was very different. You know what I mean? And I came into it uh, with different mentors. You know what I mean? And no one knew. I wasn't taught, that way. So I didn't I didn't come up that way. So um, my whole approach was different, and so I didn't. It's hard, the higher you go up, obviously become a dean, associate dean, directors, and stuff like that. There's more structure there, and there's more of an expectation, and uh, and I get it, but at the same time, you know, I still, I drop the F bombs and it's like a little rough, you know what I mean? But I gotta mind myself. But hey, it is what it is, man. This is how I came up, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
For sure. I think that's again, you're on your own journey, you're on your path, and I think that really exemplifies that, talking about how just giving yourself grace and knowing that everyone's going to get to that place where they're supposed to be, but you are just paving the way for others in the future, and just
yeah,
appreciate that. And I appreciate what you're doing. But yeah,
yeah.
I think real quick, just last question. As we're moving our generations and technology has been such a big part of it, I'm so curious
Well,
to hear more about how is technology impacting student affairs work and what have you seen?
mm, I mean, I think in it's done a it's done a it's done a couple things. as someone who, who's kind of seen, who's been around before, technology, I see the possibility of technology, you know what I mean? Like how to use it to do A, B, C, and D. Um, I also have seen sort of like how how it's taken over, you know what I mean? Like, you know, kids have been raised without knowing anything different. You know what I mean? So that they don't know another world is possible. You know what I mean? It's colored everything. It's colored their sense of time, their sense of conflict, like everything. Like everything is been uh seen through the lens of technology, like conflict, for example. Um, they're they're having all these major, beefs online. They're canceling each other. They're doing things to each other online that are just crazy. You know what I mean? Like, back in the day, man, you say two words to each other that are out of pocket, man, there's gonna be a fist fight. You know what I mean? Like now it's like, man, you can just do crazy wild shit online and you know what I mean? And so the way people treat each other just gets out of control and the way people, it just it's just changed a lot. It's changed a lot of ways in which people treat each other. It's the ways in which people have distanced themselves from each other, and so I mean I see the potential for it to bring people together, but that's not necessarily what it's done. I think it's driven people further apart. I think especially with the algorithms and all it does is create echo chambers. You know what I mean? And so as someone who's seen another world is possible, where you know humanity can instead of Facebook face to face, like those things do do mean something. You know what I mean? And it's a humanizing thing when you can sit with another person and really just be in community with them. Um, I think, but how do you know what you don't know? Like how do you you know it's just they don't know. I mean, I it's like going to the airport nowadays. I remember a time when I could just, my parents would go to Samoa and my grandmother would go with them. I could walk my grandmother all the way onto the plane and put her in her seat and set her up and then walk off the plane. Like you could do that back in the day. Now you can't go anywhere near the airport without a ticket. You know what I mean? Like you can explain to people what it was like, but it's not the same. So and then the other part of that is like, you try to focus on the positives of what technology has done. And sometimes I'm at a loss for what it's done. Um, it looks nice, the websites, the AI, some of this stuff is like it's a little scary. Uh, I don't know. That's a great question. That's a great question. I think we can't be afraid of it, because it's the future and it's what is, and you know, AI is here to stay, and um, you know, but we just kind of this is the reality of things, and we have to understand that this is the world that young people have inherited, and this is a consequence of our actions as older people. And, they didn't grow up inside of a vacuum. They've inherited what we've put down. Um, and so uh, we've got to do our best to, connect. with with the young people, whatever, wherever direction we move in as a community. And just try to be understanding and thoughtful and and gracious, and yeah. So I don't know. It's a great question, man. I don't know.
Yeah. Again, I think you said some great points. I'm saying how our generation is so different now with
Yeah,
technology. People only know technology.
yeah.
We're going to work with these students who that's all they know as people who worked
That's
in,
their go-to. Yeah,
haven't known technology beforehand. Like you said about the airplane, I think it's a very different generation and how we're going to support them. And it sounds like a big part is like humanizing them as we're still a community and how we
right,
be a part of that community and humanize all students.
right, right. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, thank you so much for your time. I
All
appreciate
right.
you just being willing for your interview. And yeah, and just thank you so much.
All right, Tyler.